Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 11 college football predictions. So last week in Week 10, I had a pretty good week, going 12-5, and that brings my record on the season to 147-39. And before we get into my predictions for this week, I'm really late recording this video. I'm not recording until Saturday morning, and usually I would predict every game that includes a ranked team. However, USC Northwestern played last night, and I would have taken USC, and they did end up winning, but I'm not going to count that towards my record this week. But we'll start off with Indiana at Penn State. So Indiana, they're great. They're 9-0, and they might be the best team in the country. And they don't face a Penn State team that has not been very good, as they're just 3-5, and they've lost 5 games in a row. And Penn State, they still haven't beat a power conference team yet this season. But I mean, Penn State, they're still a very talented team, and this could be a decent matchup. But the offense for Penn State, they're not great, as on their 5-game losing streak, they're scoring just 24 points per game, and they don't face an elite Indiana defense that is third in the country, allowing just 10.8 points per game. And then on the flip side, the Indiana offense is actually the number one offense in the country, putting up over 46 points per game. And Penn State's defense isn't the greatest, but isn't terrible, as they're allowing 21.8 points per game. Although in their last 5 games, they're allowing over 31 points per game. But this game could be interesting because Penn State still has a lot of talent, but Indiana, they're the much better team at this point in the season, and I've got Indiana pretty big, 37-13. Next game, we have Georgia at Mississippi State. So this one's interesting. Georgia's 7-1 and coming in off a win over Florida, but they now face a Mississippi State team that's 5-4, and they've played some good teams in very close games. As they took Tennessee and Texas both to overtime, and they probably should have beaten Texas if they didn't blow a 17-point lead. But I definitely think Mississippi State could make this tough for Georgia, especially because Georgia goes to Mississippi State, and it's right in the middle of a rivalry game against Florida, and they play Texas next week. So I don't think this is going to be easy. I definitely think this could be a trap game for Georgia. But I mean, this game is going to be pretty interesting. On the offensive side of the ball for Georgia, they're pretty good, putting up 32.5 points per game, and they run the ball well, averaging over 180 rushing yards per game. And then they match up against a Mississippi State defense that isn't the greatest, as they're allowing about 25 points per game and over 160 rushing yards per game. But then on the flip side, Mississippi State's offense isn't that bad. They're scoring over 33 points per game, and they've got a good passing game. And they face Georgia defense that is pretty good, but they will allow some points, as they're giving up 19.6 points per game. But this is a really tough game to predict, and I can definitely see the upset happening. And if it does happen, I wouldn't even be surprised. But I'm going to take Georgia to get the win. I don't really think they'll play that well, but we've seen that a lot from Georgia this year where they haven't played that well and just barely got the win. I think that happens again. I think this is a little bit of a higher scoring game because Mississippi State can score, but I'll take Georgia by a score of 30-28. Up next, we have Texas Tech at BYU. This is a great game, and this is a game between two potential college football playoff teams, as BYU is currently 8-0 and Texas Tech is 8-1. And this game could also be a preview of the Big 12 championship game in a few weeks. But this is going to be a great game. On the offensive side of the ball for Texas Tech, they're tied for third best in the country, putting up 43.6 points per game. And they're also very well rounded, with nearly 300 passing yards per game and 200 rushing yards per game. But the Texas Tech offense, they face a good BYU defense that is holding opponents to just 17 points per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for BYU has also been great, as they're putting up 36.3 points per game, and they're also very balanced, as they're averaging exactly 216 passing yards per game and 216 rushing yards per game. And BYU, they've also got a great quarterback with Bear Bachmeier, who's played really well for a true freshman with 20 total touchdowns. Even though BYU does have a good quarterback and a good pass game, their offense is built through running the football. But the offense for BYU, they face a great Texas Tech defense that is allowing just 13.2 points per game, and you also cannot run the football against this Texas Tech defense, as they have the nation's number one run defense, allowing just 76 rushing yards per game and 2.4 yards per carry. And if you want to try to throw the ball, it's also pretty tough, because this is an elite pass rush led by David Bailey, who leads the country with 11.5 sacks. But this is a really interesting matchup, and I can definitely see this game going either way. But I'm going to take Texas Tech to get the win. I like their offense a lot, and I think they're going to be able to score against tough defense. And even though Bear Bachmeier has handled himself very well for a true freshman, I don't think he's going to be able to handle this Texas Tech defensive front. And I'm going to take Texas Tech to get the win by a score of 30-21. Next game, we have Ohio State at Purdue. This is a game that shouldn't be that close. Ohio State is arguably the best team in the country, and Purdue is not good as they're just 2-7. And they're also winless in conference play. And Purdue actually hasn't won a conference game since the last game of the 2023 season. But this is just not a good game for Purdue. Their offense is scoring just 22 points per game. They're allowing 27 points per game. And you compare that to Ohio State, who's scoring 36 points per game and allowing 7 points per game. But I don't really have a ton to say about this game. Ohio State wins big, 43-9. Up Up next, we have the Citadel at Ole Miss. This game is not going to be close. The Citadel's not even good at the FCS level. I'll take Ole Miss 52-6. Up next, we have Texas A&M at Missouri. So Texas A&M is great as they're 8-0, and they face a Missouri team that's 6-2, and coming in off bye after their loss to Vanderbilt. And Missouri is going to be without starting quarterback Bo Perbula after he got hurt against Vanderbilt and he's out for the year. So true freshman quarterback Matt Zollers will be getting the start, and he does not get an easy matchup in his first start against a great Texas A&M defense. Although the defense for Texas A&M hasn't been as good on the road, as in 3 road games this year, they've allowed 40, 42, and 25, and that averages out to over 35 points per game. But I do think the Texas A&M defense will play pretty well, considering they're playing quarterback making his first start. And on the offensive side for Texas A&M, they've been great, putting up 37.8 points per game, and they're really balanced, great through the air and on the ground. But the offense for A&M, they face a great Missouri defense that is allowing just 16.8 points per game, and they're allowing just 245 total yards per game, which is top 5 nationally. But I think this could be a pretty interesting game, especially when you consider that Missouri's been pretty good at home, and Texas A&M isn't the greatest team on the road, even though they have won all their road games, because they've won every game. But I'm still going to take Texas A&M to get the win. I think their offense plays well, even against a tough defense, and I think their defense is a great game against an inexperienced quarterback. So I'll take Texas A&M to get the win pretty easily by a score of 31-10. Up next, we have Oregon at Iowa. This is another really interesting game, and this is a big game for the college ball playoff race. Because Oregon, they were ranked 9th by the committee this week, and some people think that's a little bit low. That's because Oregon doesn't really have that big quality win. But they have a great opportunity to get a good win this week, as they face an Iowa team on the road that's currently ranked inside the top 20. And then for Iowa, they're also still alive in the playoff race, as they're 6-2. And even though they have a pretty tough remaining schedule, they could make the playoff if they win out. But this game should be pretty good. The Oregon offense is great, putting up 41.3 points per game, and they're writ through the air and on the ground. But they get a really tough matchup this week against an elite Iowa defense that is top 5 in the country, allowing just 13.1 points per game. And Iowa's defense is also top 10 against both the pass and the run. And then on the other side, the Oregon defense is also great, as they're giving up just 13.5 points per game, and that is 6th nationally, and they have the number 1 pass defense in the country. And that is going to make things very tough for an Iowa offense that already isn't great. Although they have been a little bit better this year than they have been in past years, as Iowa actually averaging over 30 points per game. And their run game is also pretty solid, but they still have no pass game. But this is definitely going to be an interesting game, and I think this is going to be a defensive game with how good both teams' defenses are. And if Iowa can keep this game low scoring, like really low scoring, they definitely have a chance to get the win. But I'm still going to take Oregon to get the win. I just don't trust this Iowa offense at all. I think Oregon's offense is good enough to put up points against a good defense, so I'm going to take Oregon to get the win by a score of 24-10. Up next, we have Syracuse at Miami. So Miami's coming in off another November loss as they lost to SMU last week, and they've now lost 2 of their last 3 games. And Miami, they don't face a Syracuse team that actually beat them late in the year last year. But I don't think we're going to see the same result this season, because Syracuse, well, they did get the win last year, they're just not very good this year. They're 3-6, and they're on a 5-game losing streak, and haven't won a game since quarterback Steve Angeli got hurt. And without Steve Angeli, they haven't even been competitive, losing by an average of 21 points per game. But even though Miami's not good in November, they're much better than Syracuse still, and I think Miami gets back in the win column, and they win this game pretty easily, 34-7. Up next, we have Auburn at Vanderbilt. So Auburn is 4-5 and coming off a 10-3 loss to Kentucky, and after that loss, they fired head coach Hugh Freeze. So maybe that can provide a spark for the team. Auburn, they don't face a Vanderbilt team that is 7-2, although they lost last week to Texas in a close game. But I think this game could be pretty interesting. The Vanderbilt offense is great, putting up 37.6 points per game, and they played pretty well last week despite the loss, with 31 points against the great Texas defense. But the Vanderbilt offense is going to get tested once again, because its Auburn defense is really good, giving up just 17.7 points per game, and they still haven't allowed an opponent to score 30 yet this season. And then on the flip side, the offense for Auburn is terrible. They're scoring just 22 points per game, and they're not good. Now, they did make a quarterback switch last week, benching Jackson Arnold, and instead starting Ashton Daniels, but the offense was not any better, and instead only scored 3 points. And they now faced a great Vanderbilt defense that is allowing just 20 points per game. But I think this is going to be a lower scoring game as both teams are great defensively, but I have Vanderbilt with the win. They actually have a competent offense, unlike Auburn, and I've got Vanderbilt with the win by a score of 26-12. Moving on, we have Washington at Wisconsin. So Washington is pretty good as they're 6-2, and they face a Wisconsin team that's not very good, sitting at just 2-6. But Washington is led by an elite offense, putting up 35.5 points per game, and I really like sophomore quarterback Demond Williams Jr. But the Washington offense, they face a Wisconsin defense that isn't the greatest, but also isn't that bad, as they're giving up 23.9 points per game. But then on the flip side, Wisconsin is quite bad, as they're the third worst offense in the country, scoring just 12.5 points per game. And then I'll face a Washington defense that is pretty solid, allowing 21 points per game. If I have Washington with the win here, I think Wisconsin can keep this game close for a while, but the second Washington hits like 20 points, this game's going to be over. So I'll take Washington with the win by a score of 38-16. Moving on, we have Wake Forest at Virginia. So Virginia's 8-1 and coming off a win over Cal. And they face a Wake Forest team that actually isn't that bad, as they're 5-3, although they just got demolished by Florida State last week. But Virginia's offense, they're pretty good, putting up 36.4 points a game, and they face a very solid Wake Forest defense that's allowing about 22 points per game. But then the offense for Wake Forest is not good, as they're scoring just 24 points a game, and they face a decent Virginia defense allowing 22 points per game. But I can see the upset happening here because Wake Forest defense is pretty good, and I still don't trust Virginia at all, and I'd be very surprised if they make it through the regular season at 11-1. Well, I do think Virginia's going to lose at some point. It could be this week, but I don't think it is because they're at home and they've got the better offense. But I've got Virginia 27-21, but the upset definitely a possibility. Moving on, we have Cal at Louisville. Louisville's playing well as they're 7-1, and then face a decent Cal team that's 5-4, although they have lost back-to-back games and 3 of their last 4. But the offense for Louisville is great, putting up 33 points per game, and they've got a great running back with Isaac Brown. And I think he's going to have a huge game this week against the Cal defense that isn't very good, allowing over 25 points per game and 150 rushing yards per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for Cal is okay, as they're scoring 24.6 points per game, and they face a pretty good Louisville defense, allowing 20 per game. But I'm going to take Louisville to get the win here. I don't think Cal is terrible, but Louisville, they're just the better overall team, and I've got them with the win by a score of 34-20. Up next, we have LSU at Alabama. This game could be interesting. LSU is 5-3, and they're playing their first game since firing Brian Kelly, and Alabama is 7-1. Well, in this game, we've got a great matchup, with the Alabama offense against the LSU defense. As the offense for Alabama putting up 34.4 points per game, and quarterback Ty Simpson's playing really well, with 20 passing touchdowns and just 1 interception. But the LSU defense is also pretty good, as they're allowing just 18 points per game. Although they haven't been as good recently, as in their last game, they gave up 45 against Texas A&M, and the game before that, they allowed 31 to Vanderbilt. But the defense for LSU still has a lot of talent. But then on the flip side, the offense for LSU is pretty bad. They're scoring just 25 points per game, and they face a good Alabama defense, allowing 18.3 points a game. Well, I could see the upset happening here because LSU has a lot of talent, and they're also unranked, and we have seen Alabama struggle against unranked teams. But I'm still going to take Alabama to get the win. I think LSU's defense can keep this game close for a while, but I don't trust LSU's offense at all. Eventually, I think Alabama's going to be able to score. I don't think LSU's going to score a ton. I've got Alabama with the win by a score of 31-17. Moving on, we have Notre Dame hosting Navy. So Notre Dame is 6-2 and coming off a win over Boston College, and Navy is 7-1. Although they lost their first game of the season last week against North Texas, and that game started a brutal stretch for Navy, where they played North Texas, then Navy, South Florida, and Memphis. That is a really tough stretch, especially at the end of the year. But I think this game could be pretty interesting. Notre Dame's offense is great, putting up 37.4 points per game, and they've been great through the air and on the ground. And the Notre Dame offense, they faced a Navy defense that isn't the greatest, giving up 24 points per game, and they're not good against the pass, allowing over 250 passing yards per game. And then on the offensive side for Navy, they're pretty good. They're scoring 34.8 points per game, and they lead the country in rushing with 317 rushing yards. And quarterback Blake Horvath is also great, as he's run for at least 100 yards and a touchdown in 6 straight games. But the Navy offense, they don't face Notre Dame defense that they've been playing pretty well. They're allowing just 19.9 points per game, and they're really good against the run, allowing just 90 rushing yards per game. Now, obviously, stopping triple option is very different than stopping your traditional rushing attack, but I still think Notre Dame is going to be able to contain Navy. So I have Notre Dame getting the win here. They're just the better overall team. I think Navy can keep this game close for a little bit, but Notre Dame, they're just way too talented. They're the better team. They're at home, and I've got Notre Dame with the win, 38-13. Well, those are my Week 11 college football predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think will win some of this week's big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.